Sibley, with that wonderful hat. Let's get on the chat board and give him a shout out.
This is replacing a crown that got misplaced somewhere. I have no idea where.
Your Flauschink crown has gone missing?
What?
Your Flauschink crown has gone missing?
Yeah, it somewhere in the transition from the talk of the town to somebody's garage, that one disappeared. But it was too tight anyway.
Okay.
Immediately upon being named king, my head swelled up, and what could I say?
What do all you folks think of Sibley's hat?
Let's not have a vote. It won't make any difference anyway. Flauschink is not a democracy.
Nell, we are about ready to rock and roll, right?
Yeah, ready when you are.
So I'm going to start this shindig looking over George's shoulder here, and I want to welcome everybody to the 53rd annual Flauschink celebration, virtual this year. I want to mention also from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock on Friday, right in front of Cochevers and on Elk Avenue, Lorenzo will be playing the accordion and we'll be dancing the polka on Elk Avenue. And then at 7 o'clock, they are going to announce the king and the queen. And also for the kings and the queens, the old has-beens, at 11 o'clock on Saturday, they're going to have the parade, starting at the usual spot. Now, also in attendance on Friday will be Pete Dunda. And Pete usually plays for these. He's the great polka man of the Gunnison country. But the weather's going to be a little too cold for him to do it, but he will be in attendance. And I want to see Pete. I want to find out if he knows how to do the polka. I've never seen him polka. So without any further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce my great friend, George Sibley, who was one of the founders of Flauschink in 1969.
Thank you, Dwayne. Yeah. Welcome to the 53rd Flauschink. It gets a little strange over the last couple of years, but we do what we can, and it goes on. My chore tonight, I think, is to tell you about the origins of Flauschink and what we had in mind when we started this thing back in 1969, 53 years ago, 53 Flaushinks ago, put it that way. Well, it started on a dark and gloomy January night in 1969 in the Grubstake Bar and Restaurant. Sitting around the table, later than any of us should have been up, were me, Dr. Art Norris from Western State College, a business professor, and Chuck Wirtz, a construction worker, bartender, and general, whatever you needed, he could do it person. The three of us were doing what people tend to do in paradise, and that's sitting around thinking of ways to improve paradise. One thing that had always bothered me for 2 years, I should say, for 2 years it bothered me. It felt like always at that point. One thing that bothered me was the fact that the ski area just seemed to dribble off, or the ski season just seemed to dribble off into nothing. It ended with a whimper, and it seemed like it was something that should end with a bang. Now, people around the world, going back into the hunter-gatherer days, have always celebrated the coming of spring and the end of winter. Winter is a time when you had to hunker down and might survive or might not. And it is natural to want to celebrate at that time. But what we wanted to celebrate was the end of winter in Crested Butte, which at that time meant the end of the ski season. And that was usually at least a solid month from anything that would look like spring in the upper end of the valley. Uh, but that was important too. It was important that we celebrate that. We agreed that night, sitting around a table in the grub stake, that this is a big deal. Most places, people do just hunker down for the winter and uh, take it as easy as they can. Hope they've got enough food stored up for the winter. But in Crested Butte, we had to be on the top of our game in the winter. It was a time when we were preparing a feast and a party for people from all over the country, all over the world, really, to come and enjoy exposing themselves to the elements that any sensible person would have been trying to stay inside and out of. Uh, so we, at the end of a winter, we have successfully, to some extent or another, carried that off. And that was what we wanted to celebrate, not as a tourist attraction, but for ourselves, all the people that had worked on this all winter and had put together a ski season for however many people showed up from the larger world. That was the basic idea, just to celebrate that. We also wanted something, because it had come to mean a lot to all of us, all three of us, that we had come into a town that already had people and a culture living there. And they were glad in some respects to see us, and they accepted us, but I think a lot of the time they didn't really understand us any more than we really understood them and their culture. It had been a mining town. There were a lot of retired coal miners around. There were several businessmen that had simply stayed after the mines closed and the railroad left, even though it looked at that point like the town had no future. They had gone out, and amongst the other things they had done, they'd visited the Forest Service and said, "Don't you think our mountain would make a great ski area?" And the Forest Service came and looked at it and said, "Yeah, probably." And so they had, in a sense, invited the ski area in, but I don't think they really were that wildly enthusiastic about it. They were happier to see the Keystone Mine firing up on the on Mount Emmons when I got there, and it was more out of their culture. And but they had at least accepted us, and as we showed a willingness to sit and listen to their stories about Crested Butte, because we kind of started to fall for the place too. And they had stories about 50, 70 years in the place, growing up there. And it was interesting, but they appreciated the fact that we would listen to their stories. And a lot of friendships were formed. And we wanted, because there were more and more of us coming all the time, and there was a sense that we could probably inundate the town, inundate the culture that had been there, and eventually that actually did happen 4 or 5 years later. But we wanted to try to make this end of the year thing, this end of winter thing, even though they said, winter's not over by then, by a long shot. But yeah, we knew that. At any rate, we wanted it to be a kind of a bridge to the culture that had been there in Crested Butte before we got there, and that we were in the process of changing. We wanted that bridge. We wanted it with the old timers. One of the things we did was this king and queen thing. And we made it a policy at the beginning that the king or queen would always be from the old timer community, and the queen or king, whichever was left, would be from the newcomers community. And that policy lasted as long as the old timers lasted. We have lost most of them. Well, we've lost my other two founding people, and I mourn all of those losses. But that was the idea, to make this a bridge with the culture that had existed there before, skiing and resortism and the amenities culture arrived and sort of overwhelmed the place. We just lost, actually last January 2020, Joe Danny, who's probably the last of the old timers that I can remember. A wonderful old man who loved more than anything dancing to polka. And that was one of the things we wanted to keep alive in Flauschink, that we wanted it to be their dance as well as our dance. And that was Pete Dunda, who's in the audience somewhere, I think, has kept that alive and for us. And we look forward to seeing what Lorenzo can do on Friday. So there's two important things that from the start we wanted this to be. But there's another thing that has kind of dawned on me over the years. Crested Butte is a community. It's kind of, it's a relatively small community, and it sometimes shows more of the attributes of a family than a community in a lot of respects. There's always something going on that is causing interesting discourse in Crested Butte. And one of the things that you learn about living in a community is that in addition to working out your problems, you need to take time every now and then to just celebrate who you are and where you are. And to all of us in Crested Butte, who we are is to some extent defined and identified by where we are. We're here because here is here. And that became another reason for keeping Flauschink going for 50 years. It was a chance for the community to just say, forget the zoning, forget the forget the housing problem for a minute. Let's just remember where we are and who we are and get off on that. And that is what I have to say about the origins of Flauschink. As I said, I regret that the other two aren't here to contradict me where I've taken liberties with what they might think it's about, but thank you for listening. And now we'll turn it over to the one and the only, the guy who has been here since the mountains were created, I believe, Dr. Dwayne Bandenbush.
Yeah, thank you, George. Thank you very much, George. I appreciate that. And we're going to say a few things about Flauschink, and then we're going to go right over to 91 different pictures. So here we go as I get my glasses. One of the things I'd like to start with is a great song that I grew up with. It went something like this. Once upon a time, there was a tavern where we used to drink a glass or two and laugh and wail away the hours and think of all the great things we would do. And then the chorus would say, those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. We'd sing and dance forever and a day. We'd pick the life we'd choose. We thought we'd never lose, for we were young and sure to have our way. And with that, I'd like to have for everybody a moment of silence for 4 people that we lost the last year, and even more that I'm not mentioning: Yank, Mikey, Jeff Pike, and Steve Snyder. Steve very much a part of Flauschink every year. So a little moment of silence. Thank all of you. And now I want everybody on board to sing the traditional song, and George and Mario are right behind me. They're going to sing too. So here we go. When it's springtime in the Rockies, I am coming back to you. Little sweetheart of the mountains, with your bonny eyes of blue. Once again, I'll say I love you, while the birds sing all the day. When it's springtime in the Rockies, far away. And I think springtime was about 10 days ago. So here we are with springtime in the Rockies. A few comments now about Crested Butte before we get into the photos. Placer mining, decade 1860, 1870. Free gold, placer mining the streams. Shot wire, grain, flour, and dust. Put it in your saddlebags right away. Lode mining, 1870s, 1880s. Underground mining, 5 great camps: Irwin, Gothic, White Pine, Pitkin, Tin Cup. And then came the Panic of 1893. And when the Panic of 1893 hit, silver mining was done. And the cousin Jacks, the people from Northwestern Europe, began to leave. But coming in to replace them were people from Southeastern Europe with strange sounding names like Krismanich and Saya and Mihelich and Panyan. And they began to work in the thing that was the destiny of Crested Butte, and those were the coal mines, the CF&I big mine on the bench, and 8 other mines in and around Crested Butte. When the mining camps existed prior to coal mining, there were great tour races where miners from all of the different mining camps would get together on the weekend, and they would race for a $25 or $30 prize. And the greatest race of all time, written up in the Colorado Ski Museum at Vail, was the great race on Washington's birthday, February 22nd, 1886, in Crested Butte, right above the bench on Gibson Ridge. And there all the great skiers gathered. 525-yard course, unkept snow. You didn't prepare the snow. No gates. Fastest one down is the winner. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad brought in 1,000 people by rail, and they were down below drinking and betting on their favorites. And 4 men went into the finals. The winner of each heat went into the finals. And 4 men stood on top of Gibson Ridge on that Washington's birthday in 1886. Tour mining engineers from Irwin, Harry Cornwall and Al Fish. The third was the champion snowshoer. That meant skis at that time. The legendary Al Johnson, who had carried the mail many times between Crested Butte and Crystal. And then there was a 16-year-old boy that nobody knew very much about, and his name was Charlie Bainey. And Charlie Bainey, the newspaper account said, had been fairly raised on snowshoes or skis. A rifle shot sent them off. Immediately, Fish and Cornwall are out of it. They're over their head. And halfway through the race, the newspaper account said about Charlie Bainey, the light, nimble little fellow doubled himself on his shoes and he shot down the mountain like a speeding bullet. And I believe that Charlie Bainey went into the first racing tuck in history. Al Johnson's mother didn't raise the dumb kid. He was about 15 feet off to the side of Charlie Bainey. When he saw what Charlie Bainey did, Al Johnson did the same thing. But as they flashed through the finish line in the flats down below, with 1,000 cheering spectators, Al Johnson had been beaten for one of the few times in his life by 18 inches. The estimated speed, 60 miles an hour. Everybody paid off their bets, went into Crested Butte, polka music, drinking, and a great day had ended with one of the great races in the history of the Gunnison country. One of the great snowshoe carriers also, in addition to Al Johnson, was a man named Alex Perrent, a French-Canadian from the Saint Laurentian Mountains of Quebec, Canada. And for 38 years, from 1880 to 1918, Alex Perrent carried the mail out of Tin Cup all the way to St. Elmo on the east slope and all the way to Aspen on the west slope, all on one trip. And he did that for 38 years. A legend then, a legend today. When the Panic of 1893 hit, as the song indicated when I grew up, the good times were all gone and we're bound for moving on. But before lifts came, local people of the Gunnison country and surrounding areas began to walk up on top of hills, and they remained skiers. And they walked up near Monarch, Quicks Hill, 8 miles south of Crested Butte, Chicken Ranch, about a mile up the Slate, Gibson Ridge, the flank of Mount Emmons, Chocolate Peak on the west end of Crested Butte, and Marshall Pass. 11 ski areas existed in the Gunnison country with lifts. And I'll tell you what, we're going to give a book away on Crested Butte to anybody who can name it. They got to name all the 11. And I won't name them right now. And then came Camp Hale during World War II. 10th Mountain Ski Division trained at Pando right off Tennessee Pass. Federal government put $128 million into it in buildings. 14,300 men trained there to fight in the Rockies if the war came to us, and if not, in the Pyrenees and in the Alps or the Apennines of Europe. 900 of the 14,300 died. And while they were training at Camp Hale, whenever they got a furlough, they went to Aspen and they rode the boat tow 500 yards up to Ajax Mountain and skied down. And they slept on the floor of the Hotel Jerome. And to stay warm, they drank a drink that kept everybody warm. They called it Aspen Crud. 5 shots of bourbon in a thick chocolate malt shake. When they drank that, nobody ever got cold. And he also sang a famous song that went something like this. There are systems and theories of skiing, but one thing I surely have found, skiing's just good in the winter, but the drinking's good all year around. The Western States ski team, led by the great coach, Alpine and Nordic coach Sven Wick, who was the U.S. Olympic coach at Squaw Valley in 1960, trained at 2 of the areas. One was Pioneer, 3 miles up Cement Creek, the first chairlift in Colorado, winter 1939 and 40. And the other one that came later, 1950-51, replacing Pioneer, was Rosman Hill, 5 miles south of Crested Butte and on John Rosman's ranch. Crested Butte became famous as a ski area during the winter of 61 and 62. When a couple of Kansans named Dick Eflin and Fred Rice started the Crested Butte ski area. In January of 63, the gondola went in. Father Leo McKenna of Gunnison, Catholic priest, blessed the gondola as they did always in Italy. When he blessed it, right after that, the gondola broke down for the rest of the day. And Father McKenna fractured his kneecap in a fall going out to the car in the parking lot. A very inauspicious beginning. One of the homes of the Molensiks, who had the ranch that Dick Eflin and Fred Rice bought at the base of the ski area, that was called the Beer Stube. And a guy named Buck Kelly played the banjo. And they always said that the music was hot, the beer was cold, and the women were always good looking. Jack Hudson, a ski patrolman, always came up the snow jumped over the roof and landed in the parking lot. And a guy named John Hoffman, a Western State student, began to practice flips right outside of the warming house. The place to be in Crested Butte during Flauschink or any other time was Frank and Gals on Elk Avenue with Cindy, a girl from Louisville, Colorado, playing the accordion. One day after skiing, I walked into Tony's Tavern to have a beer and a hamburger, and a guy walked in with a guitar and asked the bartender, Whitey, if he could strum his guitar by the fireplace. And Whitey said yes. And in 15 minutes, the place was packed and you couldn't get in the door. And the guy was playing Wasting Away in Margaritaville. Some people say that there was a woman to blame, but I know it's my own damn fault. Jimmy Buffett played for 3 hours impromptu free in Tony's Tavern about the late 1970s. Rick Borkovic, wanting to be able to ski in the backcountry, revived telemark skiing in the 1970s. Galande jumping came in the 70s on Tower 7, a jump by 3 seasons. Houston, Horseshoe, and Paul Hitchcock with a jump of 229 feet set the world record. And then there was the legend of Garth Hammond. Garth Hammond was arrested during a slalom race on Flauschink in 1970 for skiing nude. Arrested by the ski patrol, put in the back of a sheriff's car, and they're heading down to Gunnison. Halfway there, around Jack's cabin, a call came over the sheriff's radio that a guy had stolen a car from Gunnison, was heading up to Crested Butte beyond the lookout. Soon the sheriff spotted the car, turned on his lights. Car went into the ditch. Guy ran out in the middle of Kenny Span's field. Garth Hammond, who's in the back of the sheriff's car with handcuffs on, said to the sheriff, "Take these cuffs off, I'll get that guy for you." Sheriff took off the handcuffs. Garth Hammond ran in the field, got the guy. Hammond is now running shotgun in the front, and the guy who stole the cars in handcuffs in the back. Thursday newspaper comes out. Headline with Garth Hammond's picture. Local hero captures thief. Not one damn word was said about Garth Hammond being nude. He became kind of a hero. 1971 Flauschink. Michael Grazier, first triple successful black backflip in history. And then at Vail, he jumped 170 feet and did a backflip. And Roger Ramjet Evans, who was listening in at Fairbanks, Alaska, he and Michael Grazier won the contest at Vail. When they held hands, went off the jump, Ramjet did a front flip, Michael did a back flip, and they went about 170 feet and they won first prize. Later on, Michael Grazier and Ramjet Evans, and you're going to see the picture here momentarily, were part of the Flying Bambini brothers, who went off a jump on the T-bar, 10 men holding hands, and landed it holding hands. Ramjet Evans, Rick Woods, Tony Nipa, John Bush, Michael Grazier, Peter Brewster, Brian Fasano, and 3 men from Steamboat Springs. Some of the great skiers at Crested Butte, Stevie Allen, maybe the best there ever was. Rachel Wiebe, for whom Rachel's Run is named, and Steve Manfredo. Today, the names are Aaron Blunk and Wendy Fisher and Cameron Smith and Patrick O'Neill and Stevie Kramer and Jill Matlock. Crested Butte has always been more a state of mind than it was a place. And I'd like to acquaint you with about 5 or 6 lines of Casey's Table D'Ote, reminiscing about a mining camp high in the Rockies that had seen better days. Oh, them days on Red Hoss Mountain, when the skies was fair and blue, when the money flowed like liquor, and the folks was brave and true, when the nights was crisp and balmy, and the camp was all astir, with the joints all throwed wide open, and no sheriff to demur. Oh, them times on Red House Mountain, in the Rockies far away, there's no such place nor times like them as I can find today. And that's how we feel about Crested Butte. I will now shut up. We're going to Nell Burkett, and we're going to start 91 photos of the great days of Crested Butte and skiing. So Nell, if you're ready, on with the photos. Let's get that first one up big time. There is the first Flauschink 1969. Whitey Sporsich and Kathy Wirtz. Next. La Vida Hotel Gunnison, skating rink in front. They called the La Vida Hotel, which was built for $250,000, teak and mahogany, gold lace, crystal chandeliers, and one person called it a peacock among mud hens. Next. This is skiing in Crested Butte. And now you get a good look at the length of the skis, 9 to 14 feet long, weighed 8 pounds, leather toe piece so your mining boot could fit in the front, 4-inch heel block in the back, boot could go up but not back. And then you had a 7-foot long guide pole, and you can see all the guide poles. And there they are, skiing at Crested Butte in 1882. Next. Again, the length of the skis. This is a man and his wife in Crested Butte in 1903. Get a load of those tips that were boiled in camp kettles. I can guarantee you, you try to turn those suckers today, and it'd be a lot more difficult to turn than they are right now. Next. Little boy up Ohio Creek, 1908. He's not going anywhere. The dog is bored, and that kid probably is just kind of standing on those skis. Next. Little girl named Esther, 1906 marble. And you can see the primitive binding she's got and the long skis. Next. This is 1913, Animas Forks, Colorado, high above Silverton, almost 10,000 feet, and so much snow that the telegraph lines were covered. Next. This one I'll read on the side, 1907 Crested Butte. Ready to start snowshoeing or skiing. This is before, as I have labeled. I wish I had a picture of after. You would not have recognized them as the same party. Obviously a tough day on the slopes. Next. There is the Denver Rio Grande right in front of the water tank at Crested Butte in the 1930s. Next. Mr. and Mrs. Carl Bergman, 1905, located right where the golf course is at Skyland in Crested Butte today. Next. There is Elk Avenue in 1884 with the great Elk Mountain house on the left, looking west. Street has not yet been paved. That water you see on the right is not an irrigation ditch. That just takes care of the excess water. Next. Nell, we're waiting for next. There we go. There is what the locals today call Cloud City. That is anthracite. Smith Hill. That is as far north as the Denver Rio Grande ever went, 4 miles north of Crested Butte. And that is the largest breaker west of Connellsville, Pennsylvania in the year 1883. And you can see the tram on the right. And the coal came from Smith Hill down that tram and into the breaker. And it was broken up into 5 sizes. Next. Gothic Mountain, 12,500 feet. And there is the 3-story Gothic Hotel. This is in the 1880s. Next. There's the Elk Mountain house. Crested Butte's answer to the La Vida Hotel. That would be Donita's today, or what was Donita's. Next. Western States skiers playing Crack the Whip on Quicks Hill. That game is dangerous when you're in the playground. A hell of a lot more dangerous on the hill. Next. Pioneer Ski Area. First chairlift in Colorado. 3 miles up Cement Creek. That building you see on the left is still there. It's the Pioneer guest cabins today. You can stay there today. Next. There's the modern chairlift. The Forest Service, when they saw this in the fall, said these chairs are too high. You got to lower them because people, if they fall out, are going to get killed. Then about 20 feet of snow fell and people began to get flipped out of the chair because their knees were up under their chin. And the Forest Service said, you got to get those chairs up a little higher because it's dangerous. Next. There is John Grodeski, who ran the Red Dolly Pub, going aloft at Rosman Hill, 5 miles south of Crested Butte. He went 300 feet off Pine Mountain in Upper Michigan, where I'm from. He is the first guy I met in Gunnison. He was bartending at Gode's, and the first guy I met is from my hometown. Next. There's the late, great Buddy Werner skiing on Rosman Hill, maybe the greatest alpine skier the United States ever had for the men. The only American man ever to win the Hahnenkamm at Kitzbühel, Austria. Darren Rawls won it one year, but they didn't have a whole lot of snow, so they only raced half the course. And they said, you win the Hahnenkamm at Kitzbühel, you'll never again buy another drink or a meal in all of Austria. And Buddy Werner never did. Next. There is Rosman Hill with the slalom course and the jumping stand there where the judges judge the skiers. And you can see the cars piled up all the way to Highway 135. Next. There is the Pershing Mine Hill, located on the lower loop in Crested Butte, built by the Crested Butte Ski Club for the local kids to jump and ski. That is Junior Gibson going aloft in 1951. Next. This is a good friend of mine named Steve Krismanich, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He is skiing the slalom at Pershing Mine Hill, and that is a tremendous photograph because with those heavy poles and those primitive skis, that is fantastic turning around the slalom gate. Next. There is the Crested Butte ski area, 1948, when it was the Molensic Ranch and no ski area. Next. There is Dick Eflin and his wife Liz on the right. And the guy lying down on the left is Paul Johnston, who built the Ore Bucket Lodge, first one when the ski area opened. Later on went to Vail and opened up the Tivoli. And Dick is playing at Erickson's Steakhouse on the lower loop. Next. Crested Butte ski area, winter 1963. There is the warming house on the left, the gondola shack on the right, and you can see one of the gondolas going up right outside of that gondola shack. Next. 1963, Volkswagen J-Bar cabin in the background and the warming house. This actually is 1962. Next. S.J. Miller coming off one of the Molensic barns. Bobby Schweitzer on the top, climbing to the top and then jumping all the way off to the bottom. Next. Warming house. Norm Simmons on the left, better known as Dr. Leroy Penguin, because he skied with a top hat and a coat that, you know, looked like you were in a wedding, and he kind of looked like a penguin. Don Spickelmeyer, and then Bobby Knowles, and I don't know the other guy on the right. This was very early 60s. Next. 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the Gunnison country. If Benjamin Franklin had been flying his kite, he'd have got a lot more than a tingle on that little metal piece he had at the end of the kite. Next. Winter 1961-62. Maroon Avenue, St. Patrick's Church, big snow year. Next. Four Ladies Steamboat Springs 1920. As Bob Dylan said, the times they are a-changin'. And if you'll notice, the three ladies on the right got guide poles. The lady on the left has got two ski poles with baskets. Next. Shooting rabbits right where the Gunnison Airport is today. The guy in the middle is Bill Calkins, who had a florist shop for many years, 1924. Next. Crested Butte Town Band, 1900. You can't quite see the guy on the left, but he looked a lot like John Belushi. Next. Crested Butte Coke Ovens, 154 of them. They heated the bituminous coal red hot. It was called coke. Took to the CF&I steel mills. Limestone came from the limestone quarry east side of Monarch Pass. Iron came from Trinidad. All together at the CF&I steel mills in Pueblo, where they were put into a blast furnace invented by a guy named Henry Bessemer of England in 1856. And that blast blew more of the impurities out. And that's how you converted iron into steel. And Crested Butte was absolutely essential in the Industrial Revolution of the United States because of the coking coal. Next. Now we come, ladies and gentlemen, to the greatest skier of all time, with all due respect to Roger Evans, Mike Grazier, Aaron Blunk, Stevie Allen, Jeff Pike, Bob Vandevort, Wendy Fisher. Here we have Carl Easterly, 1938, graduate of Gunnison High School, 18 years old, building a jump on Quicks Hill and doing some of the first backflips ever seen 83 years ago. Next. He is now at Sun Valley, Idaho in 1946. You can see all the guys filming on the right. They're filming for an early TV program called You Asked For It. Carl Easterly and his brother Verl are being pulled by an ancient helicopter at 50 miles an hour. Next. They did a flip over that wooden fence. Carl Easterly is now on alpine skis at 50 miles an hour, gonna go across a 100-yard long pond. Next. He makes it. Next. He does a backflip over another wooden fence at 50 miles an hour and makes it. Now, Carl Easterly, I knew very well, and I got all the footage of this, moving footage. He retired and lived at Silverthorne. And every year I gave this, and I want everybody, wherever you are, to do it tonight. I would say he was the greatest there ever was. And I want everybody to give Carl Easterly a standing ovation. And then I would call him the next morning. And I would say, Carl, I introduced you as the best there ever was, and they gave you another standing ovation. He died at the age of 94 in Silverton. In my opinion, the best there ever was. because he was doing things in 1938 that nobody even thought of doing. Next. Western State Ski Team, Rosamond Hill, 1952. Over Sven Wick's right shoulder on the left side of the picture, you see the sign that says tow tickets, $1. $1 for the day of skiing. Next. Chicken Ranch, 1 mile up the Slate. And you can see that the skiers just came straight down, and you can see on the right, they built up a little jump, and all the young people came off that jump. Next. Here we are waiting in line to get inside the gondola shack, to get 3 people in the gondola and then go up to the top. This is 1963. Next. Western State Ski Team, early 1960s. There are 3 Olympians in that picture. Jim Balfance on the right, Sven Wick on the left. You see Billy Schweitzer, some of you knew him, second from the right in the back. Next. There's the Crested Ski Patrol. Boy, what a motley crew that is. Now I'm going to identify a few guys. On the right in front is Eric Lamb. In the middle is Ron Kovanik, head of the patrol. On the right, second from the right in the back, Charlie Pulcinelli. In the middle in the back, and we just lost him in an avalanche about a month and a half ago, is Jeff Pike. The woman in the back is Tracy Wickland. And second from the left in the back is Marshall Teddy Connors. Next. Franken Gals, the place to be. It's about where the post office is today. Next. Crested Butte, winter 51-52. You had to tunnel in to get into the business establishments. And I don't know what those cars are doing. Most of them were put on blocks because the roads weren't plowed. Next. Skiing over East Maroon Pass to Aspen. I'm right on the top of Copper Lake, about 1970. Next. Camp Hale, right off Tennessee Pass, 1942, home of the 10th Mountain Ski Division. Next. Robel Strobauer, second head of the ski school. Sven Wick was number 1. His grandson is Aaron Blunk, one of the great skiers in the world today. Next. Coming off of Monument with Crested Butte in the background, Mount Crested Butte in the background, 1972. Next. Chair 1 Aspen. This is in the 1950s. I've ridden that chair. You got a blanket over your legs to keep you warm. It's a 1-chair lift. And if you look in the background, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that there are city blocks in Aspen with nothing in them. You could have bought the whole block for $5,000. They tell me now it's a little more expensive. Next. Crested Butte Ski Patrol, 1966, left to right, Jeff Jacobson, John Burns, Mike Zaradka, Walt Fricke, and there he's right in back of me is George Sibley. And then you got Don Bachman and Billy Schweitzer. Next. Crested Butte Rock School, 1883, still there. Next. Now, when I was working on my book on the Gunnison country, I'd ride up with the ski patrol, 10 to 8. We would then leave at 8:30 after their meeting. This is Phoenix Bowl. All the patrolmen you can see in the background. And you never figured this out. I said, guys, I want to go down. Let me go down first and take some photographs. Guess who always got first tracks? No moguls. Next, Steve Manfredo died climbing Communist Peak of pulmonary edema late 1980s. One of the first great backcountry skiers of them all. And they got a run named for him today. Classical piano player also. Great person. Next. That is what the tailings looked from the Keystone Mine, and all of that stuff flowed into Coal Creek, the drinking supply of Crested Butte, until the treatment plant went in and cleaned it up. Next. There is Paul Johnston's ore bucket, 1963, the only building there. A lot more of them there now. Next. This is an avalanche. It came down by 3 seasons, 1986, I think, and a little boy from Texas in the parking lot ready to go home to Texas was killed. Today, they got snow fences up near the top to catch it. Avalanches never sleep, as we have so brutally found out this year around the nation and in our own area. Next. That is Tony Capuchin drawing a beer at Tony's Tavern. When Dick Eflin walked in, he said, "Boy, you got a lot of great scenery around here." And Tony Capuchin said, "You can't eat scenery." He was an old coal miner. Today, that's the wooden nickel. Next. Crested Butte, Christmas Eve, 1955. Taken by Bob Arnold, good friend of mine. Next. This is Lisa Blanc, the father of Aaron Blanc, with her father, Robel Strobauer, in the background, learning how to ski early 1960s. Hope Lisa's on board tonight. If she is, hi, Lisa. Next. There we have the Flying Bambini brothers. Roger Evans is on the call tonight. G.J. Santelli wasn't in the photo, but he knew all those guys. 10 guys doing a backflip off a jump on the T-bar and landing it successfully. Unbelievable. January 1975. Next. There's the beer stube, the Molensic home in the summertime, where, as I told you, the music was always great, the beer was always cold, and the women were always good looking. Next. Father Leo McKenna blessing the gondola, which broke down, and then he fractured his kneecap on the way to the parking lot, January 1963. Next. There is a young man going off of the jump at Pershing Mine Hill. And those of you who are familiar, that is the Gronk that's still there down below. Next. 2 skiers skiing at Crested Butte in a tour race, 1881. Next. The guy on the left, this is at Irwin, 1886, is the legendary Charlie Bainey, who beat Al Johnson in 1886 on Washington's birthday. He later on became an engineer on the Rock Island Line Railroad in Kansas, came back to Crested Butte in his 50s and said, "There's one of the greatest feelings of all time to return to the scene of one of the great early triumphs in his life." Charlie Bainey. Next. This is Sven Wick and the Western State Ski Team. The Weenie Wagon has run out of gas near the Winter Park ski area in the 1960s, and they're pushing it to a gas station to get more gas. Next. Now this is Pioneer, and this area was very steep and everything is a fall away turn. Now this is in the 1940s, and you can see Crested Butte Mountain in the background, and you can see how steep that is as they start to go out of sight. Next. There is George Sibley coming into the Gunnison country in the 1960s, down on his luck, looking for a little gold, and his burro is packed with all kinds of stuff.
I'm the one on the right.
He's the one on the right. George just said he's the one on the right. Next. Devil's Punch Bowl, Crystal Canyon Road. Very dangerous. And that's the one that Al Johnson had to ski through, carrying the mail from Crested Butte to Crystal, 1883. Next. These are some Western State students skiing over to Marble, and they're on the flank of Mount Emmons, 1948. Took them 3 days, and they camped out while they did it. Dave Gaskell is one of them. Next. Skiing at Rosman Hill, the slalom. Next. There is Duval, unfortunately killed in an avalanche in Crested Butte Mountain, one of the legendary skiers. Next. Two of my friends and I, 1978, John Krismanich on the left, Rudy Sedmak on the right, top of the Crested Butte ski area. Next. Whitey Sporsich, one of the great old timers. He was on Omaha Beach in the Marines, D-Day. Next. There is Tony's Conoco, Crested Butte Museum today. Next. Manfredo, Teddy Connors, Scott Gerber, right outside of the East River Lift. Next. Warming House, Manfredo on the right. Freddie Root Beer holding the beer up. John Savota next to him. Next. Bringing the body in to put it in a blockhouse in the 1880s until the ground thawed, and then they're going to bury him. Next. Steve Richel, Austria, ski flying. Next. Coming off the jump at the Pershing Mine Hill. Next. Skiers skiing on top of a snow slide in Crystal, 1886. Next. Tower 7. Somebody going off Tower 7 in the Galande contests in the 1970s. Next. Winter Park. Berthoud Pass, 1930s. Next. Steamboat Springs. Next. Nell, I want you to skip by and go to about the last 4 or 5 photos. I think we had the kind of the wrong flash drive in there. Keep going. Keep going. There we go. Hold on. Go back. There is the Warming House on Christmas Eve, 1968. I just walked out of there. Polkas were going on, and I got a good shot. Next. Go to the one before that, Nell. And there's one of my favorite shots of Crested Butte. The Elk Mountain's in the background. Great winter shot. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. We've got George Sibley here. We got his wife, Maro, here. We are now ready to take any questions or comments that you have from the chat box. It's 8:04. I hope everybody's going to be around for the 5 to 7 thing next to Cochevers on Elk Avenue on Friday. Any comments? Now we got a trivia question. Who can name all 11 ski areas in the Gunnison country with lifts for the Crested Butte book? Anybody? Nell will tell you how to get on and do that.
All right, if you post in the chat and the first one that we see on our end that is correct will win the book. And I will email you to get your mailing address so Dwayne can mail that off to you first thing.
Anybody want to take a shot on the 11 ski areas of the Gunnison country with lifts? King Jeff is calling in here saying, thank you, Jeff, for the comments. Anybody else want to chat? Anybody else want to have comments? We got Sibley here to answer all the questions early in the history of Flauschink. Asher says, thanks for a good presentation. Thank you. Anybody else on the chat box? Councilman says hi.
I've got a question for you and George. So George, you had talked about earlier this, the role Flauschink played as this bridge between the old timers and the newcomers and building those relationships between two groups that may not necessarily always get along, but to have that bridge. Do you feel that Flauschink still fills that role to some degree, or do you think Flauschink has morphed to fill other roles that the community needs?
Well, I think the last thing, just reminding ourselves where we are and who we are is the really important thing. I'm an old timer now, right? Betty Spahar told me once I could never be an old timer, to always just be an old newcomer. But nobody's around to dispute me if I say I'm an old timer now. You know, but basically my culture is, you know, I was here early, and there is not that same kind of cultural divide, not divide really, that same kind of thing that needs bridged between a previous way of life and the current way of life. So I don't think, you know, we basically ran out of old timers from the early culture. And
Nell, I would say with what George is saying, that George and I would consider ourselves to be honorary old timers and trying to keep the history of the great old timers alive. They were the guys that gave us all the information. They are the guys that did all the hard work.
yeah,
Well, we always appreciate you guys sharing
he
what
keeps
you
the music alive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that you'll teach some of the newcomers the steps to the polka on Friday.
Be glad to do that. But yeah, that's only a piece of it.
Now, I want to know if anybody's going to get on board and identify those 11 ski areas for the book. If not, Sibley's going to help them out a little.
I can't name all 11. I've heard of them all, but I can't remember them all.
Anybody else on the chat board that wants to get on before we get off? Scout, thank you very much. Oh, Scout says, yeah. Scout says he got one, the Crested Butte ski area. Boy, that's a real tough one, Scout. Anybody else? They own the damn area. Teresa McHenry, the Aspen ski areas, no. Craner Hill, Pioneer, Crested Butte from Tracy Hastings, she's got 3. We got any others?
Cupola Hill.
Pershing Mine Hill, Cupola, George says we got 5. Krista checks in. Lake City, Bill Grierson, we got 6. Pershing Mine Hill, we got 7. Yeah, Susan's got them. We got 7.
Chicken Ranch.
No, that's not no lift, George. Chicken Ranch has had no lift.
Gotta have a lift? Oh my God.
We got 7. We hear 4 more.
You got Rosman?
We got Rosman. Quicks Hill did not have a lift, Scout. We got any more? Craner Hill, very good, Susan. We got 8.
Oh, did we
Man, we're
already get?
getting close to the book. Monarch is 9.
I thought we already got Craner. Did we count Craner twice?
Yeah, we got 2 more to go.
Monarch's on a different,
2 more to go, and they're tough.
that's over the hill.
I may be the only guy that ever skied one of them. Marble.
Right.
And the other one is White Pine.
Right.
Very good. You guys did very good. Any more comments on the chat board? Otherwise, Sibley and I are going to drink a beer. Now we're going to sing a song in honor of George Sibley, was one of the guys who started Flauschink. And it's a song of, it's a song of really helping George out here. So everybody can follow me along. Follow along. Hooray for George. Hooray at last. Hooray for George. He's a horse's ass. Very good. Everybody, thank you very much. Over and out. We will see you all on Friday at 5 o'clock for the polka. Thank you, everybody.
So long.
Good night.